The Irish Civil War was a war that occurred in Ireland between 1922 and 1923. It was fought between people in favour of the Anglo-Irish Treaty and those against. The treaty had been created as a result of a war of independence fought between 1919 and 1921 on the island of Ireland. A ceasefire was called in July 1921, and in December 1921 negotiations occurred. The treaty partitioned Ireland into Northern Ireland, composed of 6 counties, and the Irish Free State, composed of 26 counties. The treaty gave the Irish Free State a greater degree of independence on the same level as Canada and Australia. The British Army and the RIC police withdrew from the state. However, the treaty dissolved the republic that had been declared in 1918, and the Irish TDs had to swear allegiance to the British monarch, which was King George V at the time. The British also retained 3 naval bases along the Irish coast. By many Irish Republicans, the treaty was seen as a step backwards rather than forwards towards independence. It was narrowly passed by the Dáil in January 1922 and led to the resignation of the Irish President, Eamon de Valera, and several other members of the Dáil. Those who voted in favour of the treaty formed a government headed by Michael Collins and Arthur Griffith. Political instability coupled with military instability brought about the war. From February 1922, Collins began building a new army that was pro-treaty. In March, the IRA, the previous army, held a convention, and the majority rejected the right of the Dáil to dissolve the republic. And the two sides of the IRA almost came to blows then and there. In April, Rory O'Connor and the anti-treaty IRA group occupied the 4 courts. Collins managed to avert fighting for a while by organising a pact with de Valera. In June, elections were held. The majority voted for candidates who supported the treaty, clearly indicating that most people accepted the treaty. The election caused the pact to break down and war began. 10 days after the election, a retired British general, Henry Wilson, was shot dead by 2 IRA members. The British blamed the IRA group in the 4 courts and threatened Collins to do something or they would act. Around the same time, the pro-treaty forces arrested the anti-treaty IRA officer Leo Henderson, and the 4 courts group abducted J.J. Ginger O'Connell, a Free State officer. Collins and the government gave the IRA group a chance to surrender and return O'Connell, but it fell on deaf ears. The pro-treaty troops opened fire on the 4 courts on the 28th of June 1922, causing the IRA units throughout the country to take sides. The pro-treaty side declared they were upholding democracy and the will of the people, as they had been voted into power by the people. The anti-treaty side argued that the treaty had been imposed by the British under threat of war and therefore was invalid, as the Irish people could not have free will while there was a threat of a British reoccupation. The pro-treaty forces, backed by the British, took Dublin within weeks, while the anti-treaty forces held strongholds down south and by the sea. These strongholds were quickly taken by the pro-treaty forces by August 1922. The anti-treaty IRA waged guerrilla warfare against the state. In August 1922, Michael Collins was killed. Head of the Provisional Government and Commander-in-Chief of the National Army, Arthur Griffith, died of a stroke not long before this. As a result, W.T. Cosgrave became the president and Richard Mulcahy the commander-in-chief. In an effort to crush the anti-treaty forces, the government began executing the captured anti-treaty forces. The first executions occurred in November 1922. In all, between 77 and 81 Republicans were officially executed, and between 100 and 150 were assassinated or killed in the field. By spring 1923, the Republicans' campaign had been reduced to destruction of property, and around 12,000 were imprisoned. In April 1923, the anti-treaty IRA leader Liam Lynch was killed in action. His successor, Frank Aiken, called a ceasefire, and in May 1923 he ordered the remaining fighters to dump arms and return home, which ended the war. No formal end to the war was ever negotiated. In August 1923 an election was held, which the pro-treaty party called Common na Gael won. 8,000 of the anti-treaty prisoners went on hunger strike in November and 3 died, but the prisoners were not released until mid-1924. The absence of an effective government during the war saw a greater rise in social and criminal violence. After the war ended, the Free State established an unarmed police force known as An Garda Síochána. The war left the Irish nationalist parties polarised and embittered. The total loss of life during the war is unclear, but appears to be around 1,500 to 2,000 people, with thousands more injured. The anti-treaty force entered politics as Fianna Fáil in 1927 and came to power peacefully in 1932. For a long time, the Civil War was considered a taboo topic in Ireland and was little commemorated or studied until relatively recently. And the effects of the Civil War were felt for decades afterwards.